What's up, everybody? I wanted to come to you today and go into police stops with one more section on reasonable suspicion. So this is actually episode 14, reasonable suspicion 3. And with this one, we're going to stay in Terryville, Ohio, because there's something very important that needs to be said about this and that needs to be noted. In Terryville, Ohio, basically, the Supreme Court ruled that a person can be stopped and briefly detained by a police officer based on reasonable suspicion of an involvement in a punishable crime. If the officer has reasonable suspicion the detainee is armed, and the officer may perform a pat-down of that person's outer garments for weapons. Now, we've been talking about reasonable suspicion and the criteria for it, because at any point of reasonable suspicion, they have to articulate the crime the suspicion is bringing up. And basically what that does, it sends you into an arena, takes you to an arena of facts that must be in place per the call or per a witness for the reasonable suspicion. Now, a lot of times they use that just to look for probable cause for something, because a lot of police officers are working to write citations, or they're working to put together something that involves you to pay money, because that's what the system is now. It's not about justice. It's not even about law. It's about money. So understanding what reasonable suspicion is and part of their duties is the first step in going through and getting them to do their jobs properly. But what must they articulate when they're calling it reasonable suspicion or suspicious activity? Both of them are one and the same. It has to be specific and articulable facts that your actions are the involvement or the pretext to involvement of a crime, which is harm to a person, harm or damage to property, or them witnessing a felony. And if this is a pretext, they're definitely not looking to witness a felony. So it's going to be in something that deals with the involvement of a future crime or an imminent crime. And we'll go into certain words later. What they must do is it must be based on specific and articulable facts taken together with rational inference from those facts, and the suspicious or the suspicion must be associated with the specific individual. And again, it goes into the same circumstances could reasonably suspect a person has been, is, or is about to engage in criminal activity. Now, a lot of the times I'm watching First Amendment audits, and these guys, they do a phenomenal job, most of them. But one of the things that's constantly coming up is they say, oh, well, this is suspicious activity, I need your ID. 90% of them don't give IDs. And the reason being is because the police officer can't articulate or particularize a specific action to a specific crime. So there is no need for an ID. If you can't state what I'm doing is criminal, or you can't base it on something, and a lot of times what they're doing is, oh, well, because of terrorists. If you're that afraid to do your job, you need to find something else to do. What that does is they're putting together other things, such as they're forcing them to use the totality of circumstances standard. And in doing that, they have to go into other steps of finding out what exactly happened or is going on, or have to find out what crime is being committed or about to be committed. Now, when you talk about the totality of circumstance test or method or whatever, or standard, it refers to a method of analysis where decisions are based on all available information rather than bright line rules. Under the totality of circumstances test, courts focus on all circumstances of a particular case rather than one factor. Many times you heard me say holding court in the street. because you're dealing with someone who cares nothing about it anyway, because they know what they're doing is unlawful. And the biggest thing is we're going to speak about immunity or their lack of immunity in the next couple videos, because I told you they had a fiduciary duty to benefit you as the public, as the master. They are the servant, the choice that they made to be that. And when they violate those duties, you don't have to experience actual harm in order for them to be liable. And in doing so, they are deemed to know the law. So a lot of times when you're speaking to them and they're failing to follow orders as you give them, something simple as call a supervisor. I've noticed that a lot of guys, that when they're saying, hey, you need to call your supervisor, many of the officers refuse to do that. And they escalate situations, or even the supervisor himself comes out and begins to violate the law, because police officers are allowed to lie to you if you don't know any better. They are doing things that overstep their authority, because of a lot of times they don't know because of the way they are taught and the way they are practicing or enforcing policy. So they're expecting certain conformities whenever they speak. And one example of that is an officer say, well, when an officer gives you an order, it's, you have to do what the officer asks you to do. That is a half truth. In order for the officer to be lawful, or the officer's order to be lawful, they have to have a lawful reason to be there. They have to be lawful in the stop itself or the contact itself. It either has to be consensual, or they have to have probable cause or an articulable crime that you could possibly be committing in order to be standing there talking to you. If they do not, they are not in law making a lawful order. And it is a lie. Now, understanding that, we're going into, again, that's another case that I'll get into in the next couple videos. But now we're going to go into the bright line rule or bright line test. And it is clearly defined rule or standard composed of objective factors which leave little or no room for varying interpretation. The purpose of the bright line rule is to produce predictable and consistent results in its application. Now, when you speak about them saying suspicious activity, reasonable suspicion, they use the words reasonable because they hope that you have no idea what reasonable means in law. And a great comeback question would be, what portions of my act, such as photography, allows for a predictable and consistent act of criminal activity? They are not allowed to guess. They are not allowed to have a hunch, because that is not law. That is not procedure. That is not lawful. They will do things that manipulate as far as wording. They'll play with words all day because that's what they're taught. They're not taught actual law. So 90% of the time, they don't expect people to follow through, even if they do violate, which the majority of people do one step, which is, I'm going to file a complaint. I need to file a grievance. And then they leave it at that. But I look at it as this. When you file a grievance or you file a complaint with the police department, or you file it with an officer's captain, it's almost in the form of you're asking the police to police themselves. And if that was an effective method, we wouldn't be in the position we are today in having them do their jobs properly. And the flip side of that is also, it's like having a child. You don't tell the child's sibling in order for discipline to happen. You go to the child's parents, which the follow through becomes, you notify their captain. You notify internal affairs. You also notify the mayor of that city. You also notify the governor, because the governor appoints the teachers of those officers. So therefore, he is responsible as well. or she is responsible as well. And then I take it a step further, because you'll learn about people such as the provost marshals. You'll learn about, I believe his name is Andre Guterres, which is the Secretary General of the United Nations. He has an oath division, which holds police officers and other oath holders accountable for their actions. I'll show you methods in which to hold a police officer in state court accountable for his actions by accepting his oath. Also, as well as the judge, because you want the judge to also do their job properly and accept their oath of office. There are things that you can do to protect yourself as well. And in going through all of that is understanding that you are the master. The police officer is the servant. They are amenable to you at all times. They have the fiduciary duty. I constantly say that because it has to be reprogrammed into us. And I'm going to leave with this. A lot of times you have people that are saying things to you that you expect them to be true. And in this sense, 90% of what's being said to you is not true. And they are glad that you don't know it's not true. You have to figure out what it is that they're trying to say and attempting to do to protect yourself. And as long as you're able to mentally apply what you're learning, you're going to be able to protect yourself and protect those around you. And until next time.